Okay, good morning, party people. It is December 20th. All right, so we are back in Ezra. We're covering chapter 6 in Ezra today, but all of our reading today is so crazy. It's so amazing. I would like to do about 10 videos on what was just coming to me nonstop today in the readings. It was freaking awesome. So our daily reading today is, for those of you following along in your reading, is Isaiah 40, chapter 45, 46, which covers everything that we're talking about today in Ezra. It's all about King Cyrus and about the majesty of God and the power of God and the authority of God over everything, and the fact that he raises Cyrus. So I'd love to cover that. So we'll see if I have time to do a little bit on that in a separate video. But Isaiah 45, 46, Hosea 7, 8. So these are the prophetic books today. In our daily reading, I'm going to continue to do, I have the Bible divided up into 3 sections for those of you that have never seen my videos before. Old Testament, then the prophetic books, the prophets, and then the New Testament. That's how I do my daily readings. So today, Isaiah chapters 45, 46, Hosea 7, 8, Revelation 7, 8, Psalms 11, 12, and Proverbs 16. And then also every day we read a little bit of Revelation, Psalms, and Proverbs, okay? Okay, so today we are back in Ezra chapter 6. So far, let me just give you a little bit of historical background for those of you that have not followed any of these videos. We just finished 1st and 2nd Chronicles, and that shows the establishment of the nation of Israel under an authority of a king, right? We saw the people cried and cried for a king after they came out of the captivity in Egypt, and they were and made it to the promised land with Moses. They asked for a king, so God gave them Saul, right? This was under the prophet Samuel. So we saw Saul, then David, then Solomon, and then under Solomon, his son Rehoboam became king, but there was a division. He made some stupid decisions. So the kingdom was divided. It was split. So this is the northern kingdom, and they were not really following God. Southern kingdom did follow God most of the time, but not always. And so it ended with Zedekiah, and then they went into captivity. The northern kingdom went into captivity with Babylon, and we see this. Here's my tattered map. So we see, here's another vision picture of what I just described. Here's the northern kingdom and all their kings. Right here at the dividing line, they go into captivity with Assyria. And then here we see the kings of Judah, the southern kingdom. This is the Messianic line, the Davidic line from which Jesus came. And they go into captivity here with Babylon. Now remember, during this time, I've talked about replacement migration, right? So that's what they're doing now is just the same thing they've always done in the past. So what happened here under the king of Assyria, when these guys fell, the king of Assyria took a bunch of them and took them to Assyria, and then he brought a bunch of his people in and put them there. There's always been a remnant here. The remnant here, some of them stayed true to their roots, and they've continued to worship God. And but many of them intermarried. Same thing here. So some of them stayed true when they fell to Babylon. A lot of them went into captivity. That's where you see the story of Daniel, and he worked with the kings in Babylon. But there's always been a remnant in both places. Some of them intermarried with the people that were brought in and created, and started following other false religions. But there were always some that were stayed true to God. And so what's awesome is when we were studying Isaiah, here's where you see Isaiah. So Isaiah and, oh God, who's the other ones here? I can't see backwards. Micah, I think. These guys were prophesying, during the northern kingdom, southern kingdom, before the falls. And then Isaiah is the one that we read today, chapter 45 and 46, that foresees where we're at in our book of Ezra. So here is the book of Ezra. So after the fall of Babylon, you see down here, these are the kingdoms, right? So here is the Babylonian, or God, I can't see it, Assyria. Then Babylon comes into power a little bit, takes over here. And then you see the rise of the Persian Empire. And so that's where Ezra is. And there's a king that Isaiah, all the way back here, before the temple is even destroyed, before they even go into captivity back to Babylon, God gives him a picture and a vision of Cyrus. And Cyrus is the one that's going to allow the Jews to go back from Persia, when they had been taken captive by Assyria and Babylon, to go back to Israel and rebuild the temple. So that's what we're seeing here. So all of that to describe where we're at in Ezra. So, Ezra chapter 6. And then our reading today, Isaiah 45 and 46, is all about that vision of Isaiah calling forth Cyrus. And it's awesome. So I hope I get a chance to go through that just a little bit, because it's freaking amazing. Isaiah was a badass. Okay, so chapter 6. So what we see in Ezra, what we've covered so far, we're in chapter 6. In Ezra so far, we've seen that they've gone back, just like God promised them, but they start getting attacked, not attacked physically, but attacked emotionally, mentally by the locals, right? All the other peoples in the land. And the Bible calls them Samaritans. And so, because they were from an area called Samaria. And so what's very interesting is you see, remember in the story of Jesus and the woman at the well, the Samaritan, right? And the story of the Good Samaritan, right? So where the priest, okay, so the story of the Good Samaritan is a great example, where the Jews at the time don't have anything to do with people from Samaria because they were mixed, right? They were not pure Jewish lineage or whatever. They were not following God the way the Jews did. They were from this group where there had been intermarriages, right, with the peoples that came in. So that's what the Samaritans represented to the Jews. So in the story of the Good Samaritan, you have the priests and the Levites that leave the man that's wounded on the road, right? But it's the Good Samaritan that stops and helps the man, right? And so the same thing with Jesus at the story at the well. The woman from Samaria, right? Everyone was, all the religious leaders were appalled that not only was he speaking with a woman, but she was a Samaritan woman, right? So the animosity between the Samaritans and the Jews goes all the way back to the time of Ezra, all the way back here, because this is where, when the Jews were sent to rebuild the temple, the Samaritans began to harass them. They were lying about them. They were sending people to the Persian court that they had to defend themselves with. So then they would have to stop the building on the wall, or it would be impeded, so that because they had to go to court to do this lawfare against the local people, right? Because the local people would make these false claims to the Persian court, and then they would have to send people to defend themselves. So I've spent almost this whole video just giving you a background. Okay, so that's where we're at with Ezra. So now we have a new leader, a new representative that has come on the scene here in around Judah that represents the Persian court, right? So they had stopped building because they had been told by a previous letter to stop building until they could figure out whether or not they were supposed to be doing this, right? Well, things have kind of gotten stalled. And so what's awesome is you see in chapter 5 yesterday, we see that God, who was it? Zechariah and Haggai. Okay, so Zechariah and Haggai, those of you that know the Bible, they have their own books in the Bible. They're short books. If you go read them, they come on the scene in Ezra chapter 5, and they begin just rebuking the people, saying, what are you doing? You're supposed to be building the temple of God. You know, you're God's people. You were sent here for a purpose. Fulfill your purpose. And it's powerful. And so you see them here on the timeline. Let's see here. I wrote in Haggai. So here's Haggai, and Zechariah is right there. So these guys come in during the midst of this, right? And encourage the people to tell them to get back to building, right? So in the midst of that, we saw last time yesterday in chapter 5, this new leader who's one of 20 provincial governors that report to the king of Babylon, who now it's Darius, right? So Cyrus originally sent them forward back to Israel, and now there's been a couple other kings that have come forward, and now we see Darius is in power, right? And so he sends a letter to Darius saying, who are these people? What's going on? Search the records, find out if what they're telling me is true, because they give him a great exposition on who they are and why they're in the condition they're in, and the fact that Cyrus had told them to rebuild, right? And so now they're waiting for the letter to come back. But they did allow them to continue to build while, under the correction of Haggai and Zechariah, while they're waiting for the letter from the king, right? So that's where we're at now. Okay, so chapter 6. Then King Darius issued a decree, and a search was made in the archives where the treasures were stored in Babylon. So he's looking for the letter that Cyrus wrote. Right, so all these people that claim the Bible, it doesn't exist. There's so much biblical archaeology that proves all of this stuff. It's just insane. And as if these guys didn't have a form. I mean, these were great kingdoms, and they had a form of documentation and writing, and many of those things have been found. So I'm out of time. So okay, so I'm going to start reading chapter 6 in the second video. Okay, so hold tight. Read your Bible. Jesus is coming. And if you don't see number 2, get a good study Bible. Okay, peace. Hold tight for number 2.